Hello, everyone, and welcome to UCIPM Urban and Communities New Invasive Species webinar series. I'm Lindsay Heck, an invasive species educator for UCIPM. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have Dr. Beatriz Nobua-Behrmann with us today. Dr. Nobua-Behrmann is a University of California Cooperative Extension Advisor for Orange and Los Angeles counties and specializes in urban forestry. BEA's research and extension program is focused on finding appropriate management strategies for urban forest pests that affect Southern California's trees, like the invasive shothole borer and the gold-spotted oak borer. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Nobua-Behrmann. You may now share your slides and begin.
Thank you so much. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I hope you're having a good beginning of your day midweek. Let's get going into the growing threat to our trees. So, as means to say, I work with urban trees. And I mean, it might be slightly obvious to this group because there's a reason why you're here in this webinar, but it's never too late to say that, people need trees in urban areas. And we have a great deal of data accumulated that has been published on why are trees important for our cities and in our lives. So I want to start this webinar with a few fun facts about urban trees. The first one is that trees actually cool cities, right? We know that having a full canopy cover can provide cooling up to 18 degrees of difference. There are neighborhoods that have relatively low vegetation or percentage of canopy cover are definitely warmer. And that is very important, especially in these days with, summers getting even hotter than in the past. And related to that, we know that trees also reduce energy consumption. There was a study comparing different residential areas in Illinois showed that the trees can reduce summer consumption by about 25%. That is because they produce so much shade and lower the temperature so much. Another thing is that having trees around us equals having more wildlife. They promote wildlife. There was a study in Seattle that showed that bird census correlated with the tree density. And so at least in Seattle, what this study showed is that you need a minimum of 5 mature trees per acre in order to have any kind of bird life in that neighborhood. So we love to see birds, we love to see butterflies and other wildlife. So if we like that, we should have more trees in our urban areas. And another one is that more trees usually correlate with lower crime. So this is based on a study, a 2-year study in the Ida B. Wells housing project in Chicago, where they had areas like we can see in this figure where there was lots of trees. So all these housing projects were exactly the same, but some of them had lots of trees and some of them had little trees and some of them had almost no trees. And what they saw, like we can see in this figure, is that both total crimes were a lot lower in areas with high trees, and also all kinds of like property crimes and violent crimes, they all declined where there were more trees. And also we know that people had fewer experiences of aggression and violence whenever we have trees around. So, that is also pretty good for us. And finally, trees make people happy. In the UK, people were surveyed on a number of measurements of well-being, and people's perception of well-being tend to increase when there were more trees around. So with all of these, it's pretty clear that, urban life without trees would be a lower quality life. And we have many threats to our urban forest. We have pests and diseases, drought. We have more extreme temperatures and precipitation events expected with climate change, which will exacerbate all of these other threats, including wildfires, drought, the loss of trees through development and whatnot. But today, I want to focus on pests and diseases, which can really affect our urban canopy, and particularly invasive pests. So let's take a little step sideways and think about what is an invasive species, right? What's the difference between a pest and an invasive pest? And so for something to be considered invasive, it has to meet three requirements. It must be non-native to that area. It must have been introduced by humans, and it has to cause environmental harm, economic harm, and/or harm to humans. So anything that matches those three requirements can be considered an invasive species. And lately, we know that this higher commerce that we have between countries is what is also helping the introduction of new invasive species. Since 2010, for example, Customs and Borders Protections discovered wood boring and bark beetles in more than 300 shipments every year. And so this increase in number of exotic pests, as we can see, as the number of imported goods increases, shows how all this commerce just increases the chances that we'll get invasive pests. We look here, all the sort of cargo routes that we have coming into the US, both the East and the West Coast. I mean, it's not surprising that we're getting so much influx of new invasive pests, given that the pests, very easily hitchhike in cargo that is coming from overseas. A great deal of introduced species come here to California. We know that in here about 9 species of macroinvertebrates, which means basically mostly insects. They get established in California every year, and 3 of those will become a pest. And when we think about the urban forest, we have the perfect incubator for invasive tree pests. We have areas, so urbanized areas are usually close to different ways of entry, so they're close to ports, airports, and any places where cargo will come into a new area. We have a wide variety of trees. There's a good chance that a new pest will find the plant that they like to live or the plant that they like to eat. And lastly, the urban trees, they're not a commodity. They're not considered a commodity. And so like for example, any crop, right? Any agricultural crop are considered commodities. But since urban trees are not commodities, there's way less funding available for, state agencies to work on early detection practices, because a lot of that is targeted towards agricultural pests. And this invasive pests are a huge threat to our urban trees. For example, some of them, like emerald ash borer, are responsible for the loss of tens of millions of ash trees, which of course has direct consequences on, as we said, human health, the related loss of shade, the increase of temperature, the increased loss, increase energy consumption. Yeah, the future doesn't seem so bright. There's an estimated of 1.4 million urban trees that would likely die on the hands of invasive insects in the next 30 years. So that is why it's important that we learn how to recognize and deal with invasive pests before they become a bigger problem. And here in California, we have several, of the worst wanted pests. We have, and these are the ones that I will be talking about today. We have the invasive shothole borers, the gold-spotted oak borer, the South American palm weevil, and there's a few other pests that are not here yet, but they're a big concern for California, the spotted lanternfly and the emerald ash borer. So what I will do is I'm going to show you the basics of these pests and what you can do to identify them and to manage the impact that these pests can have. And let's get started with the invasive shothole borers. As you notice in the title, it says invasive shothole borers and Fusarium dieback. And that is because this is a teeny tiny beetle that doesn't come alone. It comes with fungus that they have a very close relationship with. And they carry the spores of this fungus in some specialized pockets that they have in their mouth parts called mycangia. And so when they go and attack a tree, what they do is they grow this fungus as a source of food, and the fungus is the one that basically affects the tree. And so in here in California, we have two species of invasive shothole borers, the polyphagus shothole borer and the Corosio shothole borer, and each of them has a different fungi, both of the Fusarium genus, the Fusarium uwelacei and Fusarium corosio. But so because the way they attack trees, the trees that they like, and the way you manage them is the same, and because the only way to distinguish between these two species of beetles is by using DNA techniques. So DNA identification, you cannot distinguish them even being an entomologist and looking at them under a microscope, sorry. Then we sort of put them both into this group, which is the invasive shothole borers. And in the disease that they cause with the fungus is called the Fusarium dieback. So the way it works is the beetles will find a tree, a host that they like. They land on the trunk and they start boring a gallery into the trunk of the tree or the branch. So they, as you can see here at the bottom left, here's the beetle at the entrance of the gallery that it was, bored right like perpendicular to the bark, so right into the trunk until they reach the cambium layer, which is the area where the tree starts growing new vascular system, and it basically affects all the tissues that are the vascular system, the xylem, the phloem, and the cambium. And as you can see in the middle picture, the yellow arrow is showing the entrance of the gallery. And then that black or like darker area, that's the gallery that eventually just turns into several side galleries. That's what the beetle basically bore into the tree. And all this area around that is this color is the area that has been colonized by the fungus. So the beetles are growing the fungus in the galleries, but the fungus goes beyond the gallery and starts colonizing the rest of the tree. And what the fungus does is basically clogs or generates a response that clogs all the vascular system. And by doing that, then the tree stops being able to move water and nutrients up and down. And that, of course, causes tree decline. And we can see dieback, like in this picture on the right. This tree has this whole right branch is lost all of the leaves and basically died. And if the infestation is strong enough around the whole trunk of the tree, it eventually causes tree death. And it can have quite striking consequences. For example, this picture is showing here in Orange County Laguna Niguel Regional Park, and more than 500 very heavily infested trees had to be removed. And as you can see, the impact on the tree cover of that park, and of course the temperature that park patrons experience and the amount of wildlife that that park can support, really changed a lot in 1 year after a very strong outbreak of these beetles happened in this area. And they have been present here in Southern and Central California since at least 2008. It's been confirmed in 2012, which, that this was this two species. So over here in Southern California, we have it from Santa Barbara to San Diego, and including all the coastal counties, but also some inland counties like Riverside and San Bernardino. But in 2023, we found a new infestation in the Bay Area in San Jose, which is showing that these beetles are unfortunately not just restricted right now to Southern California. And we don't know if this is a new introduction through the San Francisco port, or if it somewhat jumped from Southern California to the Bay Area. And in that case, the most probable way they moved is through either firewood or green waste that was hauled from one place to another. And it's a big issue because they attack a pretty wide variety of trees here in California. They attack 65 different species of trees. And worldwide, they have 77 species of trees that are considered reproductive hosts, meaning they're trees in which the beetles can reproduce, grow the fungus and reproduce and make more beetles. But besides that, they attack other trees in which they're not able to reproduce, but they can also generate some damage on the tree. And the full list for the both species worldwide grows to almost 400 different species of trees or plants that are somewhat attacked by this beetle. Because I didn't want to put 65 different species in here, I went ahead and put the short list of the species that actually get heavily attacked by the shothole borers, and these are the species that have more chances of dying from shothole borers. The rest of the species in California, they tend to have more like a branch dieback, but not usually die from this beetle. But these 15 species, they do. And the ones that I want to bring your attention to is number 3, Acer negunda, or the box elder. That is one of the most preferred species for these beetles, and also one of the most susceptible species. The picture here is showing a huge box elder in Ojai in Ventura County that was next to someone's home, that in a matter of months was attacked and killed by these beetles. The rest of the species in here, that includes, your sycamores and London planes, your cottonwoods, a few species of oaks like valley oak and English oak, the willows in here, those and other maples as well. Those other species tend to take about 3 to 4 years maybe to if they die from these beetles, it takes 3 to 4 years for that to happen. So you really have some time to manage the infestation and hopefully save your tree. And in here is also included number 12 is the castor bean, which is not a tree, it's a plant that we don't usually want to protect. So castor bean is a very highly invasive plant, as a weed. And so it also shows that if we manage this other invasive weed, the castor bean, we are doing a great thing towards managing the invasive shothole borers, because we are taking away a host that they like and a host in which they can make more and more beetles. So another point for being proactive at managing castor bean in your property, if there's any there. So how do we identify these beetles? How do we know that our trees are infested? Well, looking at the beetles are, as you saw in the previous pictures, and I can bring it back in here, they're teeny tiny. They're about the size of a sesame seed. This is a penny. So really very hard to see them. And they spend most of their lives inside the tree anyways. So the main way you'll be able to see any kind of indication that your tree is infested is through what we call signs and symptoms. So the main sign is the entry hole. So this perfectly round entry hole about the size of the tip of a medium ballpoint pen is the giveaway sign that your tree is infested with shothole borers. A lot of the times you can see the abdomen of the beetle sticking out of the hole, which is something that is very characteristic of these species. So that's something that, it's a giveaway as well, that shothole borer is infested in the tree. And then other symptoms in the tree, indicate that you should go and take a closer look. So most trees have white staining associated with those holes. Some other trees do gumming if they have a thicker sap. Others, like avocado, for example, create this sugar volcano wherever they get damaged. And once the infestations are a little bit more progressed, you can see the frass, which is basically the boring dust. It looks like fine sawdust. But in all of these cases, any of these other symptoms that I'm showing to you on the right, they need to be associated with this perfectly round entry hole about the size of a tip of a medium ballpoint pen. That is the main symptom you have, or sign you have to look for. Like staining can happen for many other reasons, same as gumming or this sugary exudate. All of that can happen for many other causes. But if these other signs and symptoms are associated with the entry hole, the right size, that is a good indicator that we have shothole borer in our tree. And some things to keep in mind is that usually we have the populations of these beetles tend to concentrate in one or a few trees in the area, where they start growing and growing and growing, like more and more beetles growing in there. So that a few trees are going to get heavily infested. And you won't see dieback in the branches until the infestation is quite advanced. So it is easy for it to go under the radar, because you're not going to have all of a sudden spread, mortality or dieback on all of your trees. But you might have a few trees that their trunks are having the signs and symptoms and they start looking suspicious. So pay attention to your trees and look for those heavily infested trees. We like to call them amplifier trees because they amplify the infestation. And those are the trees that we need to take care of as soon as possible. So a few tips for management. As I said, the first thing you need to do is monitoring. You need to know if the beetles are there and how infested your trees are before you can take any kind of management decision. Once you figure out that what you have is actually invasive shothole borers and you see how infested the trees are, you can prune the heavily infested branches if the infestation is located mostly in the branches. That it tends to be the case in oaks and in avocados for sure. And sometimes in the other hosts as well. If you have the infestation sort of concentrated in a branch, you can prune that branch, get rid of all those beetles, and you really do 90% of the work there. If you have infested and high-value trees, you can consider treating them with pesticides. Usually the recommendation is combining insecticides and fungicides. We want to attack both the fungus and the beetle. But keep in mind that there's no preventative treatment, so you should not be treating anything that is not infested. And also, all the treatments that actually work for shothole borers must be applied by a professional. Only professionals can access or can buy the insecticides in the right concentration, and they can apply them in a safe way. So if you suspect you have shothole borer, or you know you have shothole borer, make sure you contact an arborist or a pest control advisor to do the treatments in the trees. And then very, very important for those branches that you pruned, or those, if you have heavily infested trees, as we talked about, these amplified trees, those trees actually need to be removed, especially once they start having more than 50% dieback, meaning like more than 50% of the canopy has died. Those trees don't tend to bounce back even if you treat them with insecticides. So the best thing to do is to remove those trees as soon as possible. So you're removing the big source of beetles, right? But important is that that infested wood that comes from the pruning or the removal needs to be disposed in the right way. So remember that beetles can survive in this downwood for months. So if you just keep the downwood, the whatever you removed, the beetles are gonna keep popping out of there. So the best thing to do is to chip that wood as soon as it gets removed. Pass them through a chipper, and try to get the chips as small as possible. Ideally, chips that are smaller than 1 inch in diameter are the best. And those chips so chipping them, if you are able to get them to less than 1 inch, that kills 98% of the beetles. So that's huge. But still, there's that, that small percentage of beetles that still survive that chipping, and if chippered as usually don't get reliably chips that are that small, you might get a little bit more beetles in those chips. So sending those chips to a composting facility is the best way to get rid of the beetles. And then as those chips get composted, that means that the mulch and compost that comes out of that process is deemed pest-free and can be used in all of this landscaping settings. And then if you have logs and you want to use them as firewood, you can solarize them or you can kiln dry them. And I will recommend you to visit our website, where there's information of how to properly solarize wood if you are interested in going that route. So here are a few resources if you want to learn more about shothole borers. Our website, ishb.org, has a lot of information on the beetles and beetle management. You can also use this detection and management assessment tool to see if you want to know if what you have is shothole borer, and you can actually even report a new infestation if you're in an area that hasn't been infested yet, and you suspect you have shothole borer. Use the report tool that comes after the assessment, and that report comes to me actually, and then between me and our network of collaborators, we see who's if it deems to be visited and who's around and who can help with that issue. And then you can just follow us in various social media platforms if you want to have any news on invasive shothole borers. So with that, I'm going to move on to our next pest, which is the gold-spotted oak borer. So this is a pest of oaks. The adult is a buprestid, which is the groups of the jewel beetles. They look very flashy, and they're colorful. In this case, the beetles are some iridescent brown, and they have the 6 golden spots on the top of the wings. They're about 3/8 of an inch long, so basically as long as a grain of wild rice. They are bigger than the shothole birds, but they're still not very big bugs. And the main thing of these beetles, they are borers. In this case, they are not bringing a fungus with them. They basically eat the wood. And what they do is they lay their eggs on the crevices of the bark, and then out of there comes this teeny tiny larva. And hopefully you have enough resolution to see it. So in the middle top picture here, on the very left of it, there's a teeny tiny larvae, and that I'm trying to circle it with my cursor. Hopefully you can see it. That one is the one who burrows into the tree, and then it starts growing and feeding on all the vascular system of the tree again. So in a tree, you have the phloem, which is, you know, the inner bark. Then you have the cambium, and then you have the xylem. So the cambium, the phloem, and the xylem, the active one is like very close to the cambium. All of that is basically the vascular system of the tree. That is what these larvae find very yummy, and they're gonna start chewing on it and growing and growing and growing, getting bigger. Then they get this pre-pupa sort of stage. They fold in half. We call them the hairpin configuration. And they overwinter like this, and then they pupate at the beginning of the spring, and then they become adults, and they emerge out of the trees throughout the whole summer until even the beginning of the fall. So the whole life cycle takes 1 year. And during that 1 year, the larvae chew and chew and chew and eat all vascular system, and they start generating all this damage. And again, same kind of result on the tree. You have general tree decline. Then as you start seeing some dieback and eventually tree death. They attack these 3 species of oaks here in California, the coast live oak and the California black oak. Those are the most susceptible species. And then the canyon live oak is another species that they attack, but is a little bit less susceptible, meaning the damage is not as bad for the canyon live oak. But, you know, at least here in Southern California, coast live oak for the lower elevation, and California black oak in the higher elevations are very common trees in the wilderness and in our landscapes. So how do we know we have gold-spotted oak borer? Even though the beetle is beautiful, there's very low chances that you'll see the beetle, because again, they spend most of their life inside the tree. So kind of like with shothole borer, what we're looking for is that exit hole. In this case, the exit hole is a D shape, looks like a capital D, and that's because they're flathead borers, so their head is flat, but they've been eating a lot of that tree tissue, so their bellies are fat. And so flat head and fat bellies gives you a D-shaped exit hole because they chew as much as they need so they can leave. So if you see D-shaped exit holes in an oak in California, there's no other thing that does that. That is the gold-spotted oak borer, at least for now. Other things that you can notice is some trees, when they start getting heavily infested, you can notice some dark staining on the bark. But again, that staining, if there's no D-shaped exit holes around, could be caused by many other different agents. You can see dieback in advanced stages of infestation. But again, dieback alone is not a sign of GSOP. It could be even drought can cause dieback. Woodpecker activity, like in here. So when the pupa are developing at the outer side of the outer layers of the bark, Woodpeckers will find them and eat them sometimes, especially in heavily infested trees. So you might see this areas where the woodpeckers have removed part of the bark. Unfortunately, woodpeckers are not strong enough. They don't consume enough to be considered any kind of biocontrol. And then if you chop into the tree and you get rid of the bark layer, which is this red tissue here, you can see in the cambium layer, you can see all these galleries. They basically have no particular pattern and they look like black spaghetti. And that is the kind of pattern that GSOP does, right? A lot of bark beetles can produce very specific kind of patterns. And the pattern that GSOP has is that there's no pattern and it just looks like a plate of spaghetti. And then even if you do that, if you you can even see sometimes like in this picture, there's a little larvae or pupa in the outer side of the bark. So very low chances that you will be getting an axe at your tree if you love your tree. So this is something that you would do to confirm infestation in a heavily infested tree. But mostly look for these D-shaped exit holes and use dieback and staining as ways to, knowing that something's going on with your tree and you should go check it. So we have GSOP is originally from Northeast Arizona, but is invasive here in California. And we know that it came to California through firewood, because between the area where they live in Arizona and here in California, there's a desert and there's no host. So there's no chance that they could be had dispersed on their own. And unfortunately, firewood is one of the main ways this beetle disperses. It's been found first in San Diego here, and it's quite widespread in there. And then we started seeing small focuses of infestation in other counties, in Orange County, and in Lake County, and Ventura County, and San Bernardino County, and Riverside County. And in all of those cases, it's been linked to the movement of infested firewood to these locations. So one of the things that we find with studying the infestation of this beetle is that these amplifier trees are heavily infested trees. So the ones that have more than 25 exit holes are already considered heavily infested. And they're about 10% of the infested trees, yet they contain up to 90% of the GSOP beetles or larvae that are in that area. So if we remove those trees, we're getting rid of up to 90% of the problem. So they're good candidates for removal, especially knowing that once they reach this heavily infested or amplifier status, they don't tend to survive. And like with shothole pottery, it takes about 3 to 4 years for a tree to start showing signs of decline or even to die from GSOP. So looking for those D-shaped exit holes early can help you save that tree. So I said those brood trees or amplifier trees or heavily infested trees needs to be removed, but yet the bark of that tree still harbors a lot of the larvae and pupa from the beetles. And just to give you an idea how dangerous that infested bark can be, this little square of bark, this little amount of bark can produce this many goldspotted oak borers. So this was 186 beetles that came out, that were larvae and developed and came out of that little amount of squares of bark. So what do we do with that infested wood so we don't spread the beetle? The easiest way is to chip it. In this case, 3 inches or smaller is enough to kill all the beetles. So putting that wood through a top grinder or a chipper is the best mode of action, easiest. If you want to use the wood for firewood, you can season the wood for 2 years, but you still have to contain the wood in a way that the beetles that come out of there don't go and infest the trees around. You can do that with a plastic tarp, which is not that recommended because it tends to break, and you really have to make sure that you seal everything that the beetles cannot escape. Metallic mesh works better. Plastic mesh doesn't work because the beetles can chew through, if they can chew through oak bark, they can definitely chew through plastic mesh. But a metallic mesh works for like small amounts of wood. And another option is to debark the wood. In the center, the heartwood can be used as firewood. Is pest free as long as you remove all of the bark. But then the bark needs to be chipped or buried or burned. And there's options for chemical pesticide treatments, but you have to keep in mind they're not much practical or economical, and so it's only recommended for very high value trees, and only if all these 3 conditions are met. There has to be GSOP confirmed within 5 miles. You have to have a species of oak that's susceptible and relatively large. They don't tend to attack oaks that are small. And you have to have a tree with good vigor, right? A healthy tree. And again, in order to be any of the treatments recommended for this pest need to be applied by a pesticide applicator. But if you want to know more about different management strategies and all of that, you can visit our website, gsop.org, and you get a lot more information in there. And also, if you suspect you have GSOP, you can also report a GSOP suspected tree. And same thing like with shothole, will our network of collaborating multi-agency group will get that message and send someone to double check on that tree, especially if that tree is in a new area that we didn't know was infested. So these were small beetles. We start with sesame seed, then wild rice size, and now we go into our I don't know what's about an inch and a half, as you can see how big this other beetle is. A full date size, basically. And this is the South American palm weevil, the third species that I wanted to make emphasis on. And this is a weevil that is native to South and Central America and likes to attack palms. Specifically, they really like the Canary Island date palm. There's other species of palm that also get infested, but mostly the Canary Island date palm is the one that gets the most affected. It's a huge beetle. It's hard to miss. And we find it's been present in most of San Diego County since 2009. But in about a month ago, it's been found in Orange County in Southern Irvine. So it took years for these weevils to spread all the way to Orange County. And it's not because they can't fly. They're excellent flyers. They can fly very, very long distances on their own. They just they had enough palms in San Diego County to do their thing. But as all the palms, like Canary Island date palms in San Diego County start dying, the beetles start spreading towards new areas. And now we start having them in Orange County. It remains to be seen if it was one beetle in one trap, if it was like a one-off, one beetle that was a really good flyer and ended up in the trap, or if there's an infestation brewing in Southern Orange County, but it's imminent and it's coming. And the way the biology of this beetle works is the females are attracted to the top of the palms. They usually like fresh wounds, and they lay eggs at the top and the base of the new fronds. The larvae will bore into the crown and start feeding on the crown. They basically like to eat the heart of palm, right? And they eat that and they start making this nasty sort of brewing soup. And as they develop, they make this cocoons and they pupate. And all that feeding, just have to remember that palms grow only from the top. And so all that feeding on this growing tissue of the palm makes, kills this part of the palm. And if you kill the top of the palm, you basically kill the palm. And so the way it starts looking is as the palm gets a little bit infested, like from left to right. The first picture shows that the meristem, the tip of the palms start getting, affected. The second one shows the infestation progressing a little bit more. You start seeing some browning on that, and the palm starts showing kind of flat. And then the third picture shows a totally top flat palm that's very characteristic of this infestation with this pest, and then eventually the palm dies. And so the main symptoms are you see this top flat palms. So this palm in here on the left with the top, the flat top, it's still green. But once these leaves die, just as the regular cycle goes, it's not going to produce new leaves because the top, which is the only part where the palm grows, is dead. You might see also some signs of feeding from the adults. So it just looks like someone got a pair of scissors and started chopping on the palm of the front tops. At the base of the fronts, you can see these holes. They look kind of like Swiss cheese. You might see this if any fronts falls, you can see that on the ground. And then you might see around these pupa cases made out of the fibers of the palm. So to manage this pest, unfortunately, you have to really monitor your palms. Any new signs of flattening on top, you have to act very quickly. Any infested palm has to be removed immediately. This is difficult and costly, but is once the palm is infested, it just takes a few days for like a week for the palm to go from I'm infested to I am gone. That it's a death sentence basically. You have to remove that palm because there's a lot of beetles, developing in that palm. But and then it has to be chipped, burned, or buried, that infested crown, so you don't spread the beetles around. You can use pesticides as a prophylactic management, so like a preventative measure. They're hard to apply, they're expensive, and unfortunately, you need to, if you know the beetles are in that area, you need to constantly treat the palm every quarter in order to get protection for that palm. So it's something that is only recommended for very high value palms. And as with the other ones, only certified professionals can apply those kind of treatments. So one thing you can do to prevent this pest is try to keep your palms as healthy as possible, and then avoid or reduce pruning, as the females are attracted to the pruning wounds. So any unnecessary pruning would increase the chances that the beetles will find your palm. And we're working, Dr. Mark Huddle from UC Riverside is working on other management strategies that have to do with attract and kill systems, or pheromone confusion, which will, you put a lot of pheromone in the environment and the beetles can't find each other. And if they can't find each other, they can't mate. And if they can't mate, they cannot make more beetles. And all of that is under development. So hopefully we'll have some answers in the short to middle term for some, also with biocontrol essays to work with a parasitoid fly that can kill these beetles. So all of that is medium term or long term strategies that are up to come. So there's some hope in the horizon. So but for now, please look at your palms, and if you see any infested palm, please report them at our South American palm weevil website, so we know where these beetles are, and we can make a better plan for managing the palms in Southern California. Lastly, I wanted to do a mention to the spotted lanternfly, which is not yet in California, but it's not a matter of if it comes, it's a matter of when it comes. It lays these egg masses that can be laid in like vehicles or any inert surfaces, patio furniture, anything that can be in. When you move those things from the East Coast to the West Coast, you could be bringing eggs from the spotted lanternfly. This is what the early nymph looks like, and then the late nymph have this red. They're very flashy. The adults are also very beautiful, but they're terrible pest. They love tree of heaven, which is an infested, an invasive tree. But then they can attack grape, which would be terrible for our wine industry. And they can attack many other species of trees, causing tree decline and tree death. So if you see any of these guys, please call the CDFA pest hotline and report it as soon as possible. And the other one is the emerald ash borer. So this is the pictures that I showed at the beginning of those areas without trees, because the ash borer had killed all the ashes in that area. This one also has a D-shaped exit hole, but it's only on ash trees, and attacks all species of ash, but also could be attacking the olive trees. So, and since the quarantine that we had for emerald ash borer has been lifted in 2021, we have found it in Oregon and Colorado. So it is only a matter of time until it makes it to California. So again, if you see this pest, if you see these shaped exit holes in ash trees, please report it to CDFA. And to close this, what else can we do besides reporting this? Well, as I said, the main thing you can do is don't move firewood, no matter how tempting it is to put some free logs in your convertible. Just try to hold the urge to do that. So buy it where you are going to burn it. If you go camping or use firewood for recreation, try to don't bring firewood from home. Buy it wherever you will be burning it, ideally from within 50 miles or 10 miles from where you plan on burning it. And if you have leftover firewood, just give it to your fellow camper, leave it on site, don't bring it back home, because you could be bringing any of these awful, dangerous pests. And beware of greenways. So make sure you discard the infested plant material adequately, and I show you a few tips on how to do it, chipping or solarizing. And then mulch can also contain pests, so beware of free mulch that has not been composted. And so there's a lot of companies that will say, oh, free mulch would chip a tree and bring it to your place. Just think about that. Free mulch could bring a pest, and it could be more costly than just buying mulch that is certified pest free. So to help protect our trees from invasive pests, I'll say educate yourself about pests and diseases and how to identify them. Monitor your trees and report if you find any pests of concern. Manage your greenways responsibly, prevent the spread, don't move firewood, and then look for science-based management options. And as I always like to say, keep calm and follow IPM. And you go to our IPM website to get information on any kind of pest that might be attacking your plants. And with that, thank you for your attention. And we're kind of late, but maybe there's time for like 1 or 2 questions.
Thank you so much, Bea, for that excellent presentation.